The Genius, the Lowlife, and the Myth of Meritocracy. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of my series. I'm just going to be talking about some things that I want to share, and I don't know if anyone else feels the same way, but if you do, leave a comment. Let's chat. I want you to take a second. Put on Rawls Veil with me. If you don't know what that is, well, basically, I want you to imagine you or someone else. I want you to think about a life where you were born in Guizhou, one of China's poorest rural provinces. You grew up in a family that has resided there for centuries. Your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, spanning back centuries. From as early as you could remember, you worked on your family's farm. And it wasn't easy. You struggled not only with the hard labor due to the conditions in Guizhou, but also you were born with an untreated leg length discrepancy, which caused immense pain and discomfort. Life expectancy is short here due to the harsh conditions and the poor living standards. By 12, your mother had passed. And not long after, your father left to find work elsewhere. Promises were made, but you knew you were on your own. Your family farm soon became infertile due to a particularly nasty drought one season. And you're left with no money, no family, and unsure of your future. All by the age of 15. You can stop imagining, or if you like Rawls, you can take your veil off now. This is by no means a particularly rare story. If you're born in the West like I am, this sounds like a dystopian film. But for a lot of people, this is their reality. This is the lives of hundreds of millions of individuals around the globe. Lives that we'll never know about, and yet exist. Many will live lives far worse than what I just described here, and some will live lives slightly better. But I want you to take a second and ask yourself, is this justice? To me, the answer is a resounding no. The world as we know it, as we live in it, as we reside, is fundamentally unjust. Of course, and fairly, you'll ask, what is justice? Justice, as it's classically defined, is giving each their due. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you are a baker, you're due a bakery. If you're a pianist, you're due a piano. These are sort of like the armchair philosophy concepts of justice. We tend to think about justice in the criminal justice system, right? Punishments. If you commit a murder, you're due a certain number of years in prison. Societies also see justice in ways further than just penal code. They think about it in terms of your life. And class and social hierarchies determine, in many ways, what we each are due. This is meritocracy. The idea, of course, that what we get in life is due solely on our merits and efforts. To me, this is a far-fetched fantasy. We need to believe in meritocracy. It's fundamental to our understanding of the world. If it were to say, disappear, people wouldn't really know what to do because it's so embedded in our minds that if you work hard, you're disciplined, you're in your Sigma grind set, and you want it badly enough, you'll achieve it. I mean, how many influencers can you think of? Ashton Hall, Andrew Tate, David Goggins, I could sit here for hours, that all sell the same story. Get off your ass, pull up your bootstraps, and get to work. If someone's at the top of the cliff, it's because they earned it. If someone's falling off, well, they just didn't work hard enough or want it badly enough. But the second you stop and take a look at how lives are built, it all unravels. That kid, the one with no life by the age of 15, did they have a fair shake? Could they pull up their bootstraps and get to work with enough shoe shine, gumption, and determination? Where was their due? Meritocracy conveniently ignores the fact that success is not about grit or talent. There is an invisible framework that determines whether or not we climb that ladder. Advantages, disadvantages, and luck stacked on top of each other to an equation that turns into who we are. We get to worship those at the top, the geniuses of the world, and crucify the losers, the lowlifes, because they just couldn't stick it. If the world calls that justice, I simply can't agree. The life at the beginning of this story was a deprivation that occurred at all points of their life. They were deprived of genetic traits conducive to have a fully functioning body. They were stripped of generational wealth that they never had, that could have protected them from a drought, that could have saved them from the loss of a loved one. There was no safety nets. There was no connections. There was no internships because your dad knows a guy. They were stripped of a stable home life where they could grow carefree, develop their interests, see the world. Some would say that person in Guizhou is just, well, they're unlucky. I call injustice. The life we author, if you can call it that, is hardly based on our talents and effort. Our current lives, well, they're like a collage of everything that has brought us up to that point in time, the state of the universe built into that moment. There are 5 main categories that are us. Genetics, so things like your health, your body, your attractiveness, how intelligent you are, your talents. The second is your experiences, right? What was your environment like growing up? Did you have parents? If you did have parents, what kind of parents were they? The birth lottery. Where were you born? If you're born in Guizhou, it's gonna be a lot more difficult than if you were born to a wealthy family in Palo Alto. Family wealth is the third one. Things like generational wealth, access to opportunities, influence, and communities around you that uplift you. And finally, and arguably to some the most important, luck. Do you have a business? Did it work? Did you pick the right cryptocurrency? Were you not fired from your job because a company was downsizing and realigning with their efforts? These 5 factors determine who we are. They're the makeup of our selves. When I look at the world around me, all I see are the injustices piled up in everyone's life. I live in America. Many people call that the land of opportunity. However, I am going to go on, hopefully, to prove that opportunity isn't something that you seize. It's something that you either have or you don't. And to a large degree, if not a whole degree, we have no control over whether we seize those opportunities or not. Look, there are outliers. And honestly, at this point, if you've made it this far, you're of one of 2 camps. The first camp is probably thinking, yeah, this makes sense, but, I kind of want to hear it out. Where is this going? And the second camp has already proverbially reached down to their bootstraps that they're wearing and pulled them up and said, everyone can do that. Everyone, if they just believed in themselves and, stopped vaping and smoking weed and just got a job, that they could seize the day too. But let's talk about the outliers. And then we'll talk about why the narrative of pulling up your bootstraps is mythology. There are people who beat the odds. Although, when I say beat the odds, that makes it seem like there's this scale that you can tip in your favor. The truth is, there is no scale that we can touch. That scale has been set. And the people who beat the odds, well, they didn't beat anything because their genetics and upbringing got them there. There was no agency that flew them to this place. Hard work and grit sounds a lot like genetics and upbringing. In response to the success story, the outlier, I want you to imagine, again, the poor immigrant general reality. There are hundreds of millions of people who don't live the success story, that have the same unique hopes, dreams, and desires, and yet when it comes to attaining that reach of, wealth, prestige, happiness, they just come short. But the stories we don't hear far outweigh the ones that we do. The Bill Gates, the Elon Musks, whoever else you can think of that's rich. We hear those stories, but we don't hear the stories of the poor immigrant general realities because no one cares to listen. And also because it doesn't fit the narrative that anyone can make it if they just tried hard enough. But having a high level of grit and determination is itself a product of nature and nurture. It's not something you can just manifest day by day and push yourself to. There is no meter to fill. There is no dice to roll. The dopamine receptor genes link to reward sensitivity and persistence. The serotonin transporter gene affecting emotional resilience and stress response. The serotonin decision-making and persistence under pressure. These are all genetic. Whether or not you have these genes and whether or not they exist in a certain amount is not under your control. But here's the kicker. Genetics don't actually end after birth. Trauma, adverse developmental environments, so growing up in a poor household and living with poor influences affect your genetic expression. It influences how you respond to stress. Did you have positive role models growing up that showed you that, hey, delayed gratification is important? Discipline is an important thing to build. Did you have experiences that positively influenced determination and persistence? If you didn't, well, you might have actually had good genetics, but due to your upbringing, they were squandered. But imagine you didn't have good genetics and you had a poor upbringing. Well, you're coming up with zero. And how do you change that? To the person who pulled up their bootstraps in scenario 2 I spoke about earlier, how do you change your genetics? How do you change your upbringing? That largely determines how you respond to stress, determination, grit, those things that we say build you up in a meritocracy. You can't. How you develop is not a reflection of grit or determination. It's a product of the universe that you were put into and raised with. But I'd like to move into a couple thought experiments, a couple archetypes that I've drawn up that I think might help illustrate this point a little bit better. Let's talk about the genius, okay? The word genius means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But for the sake of the following archetype, I want you to think about every single positive attribute you could put into a create a character slot and add it to the genius. They're successful. They have prestige, wealth, talent, everything. They're the person who seemingly always has been successful, always on an upward trajectory, and always will be. No matter what they seem to do, they always come out on top. Highest and best grades in school, captain of the football team, socially powerful, and also very attractive, regardless of gender. They get to pick any partner that they want. Everyone either wants to be with them or be them. That early success, that progress, developing and being at the top of your class from the age of 6, that builds confidence. That confidence builds successful habits, successful traits. And successful traits lead into future success. Everything that I just listed for the genius was not in their control. They didn't control their wealth. They didn't control their talent. They didn't even control their grit and determination. What made them the genius is like an accidental flip of a switch that could have turned them into the next archetype we're going to talk about, the lowlife. But the state of the universe, or whatever you want to call it, happened to deem them this. An interesting note about the genius. The genius, at points in their life, are unfulfilled potential, and later are just successful. But what you notice about people like the genius is that when they die, their deaths don't seem to be quiet. You could look at the genius and say, well, that's great, but what if they're struck by an asteroid, right? Hit by a car. You'll notice people say interesting phrases like, the good ones always go first. They didn't deserve that. They had so much potential. A bright future extinguished. A life stolen. People feel that individual deserves more from life, right? Their death was not wrong because death itself is wrong or that losing life is unjust. It's wrong because people think that the genius has greater moral worth. They contend that someone's success and talent equates to their worth. That because they were the best in everything, they were somehow better than those around them. And of course, meritocracy reinforces this myth. Now, the halo effect plays a huge role here, but this video is already going on long enough, and I'm going to save that for another one, because the halo effect is really important to discuss. But just remember, the genius is there because of factors outside of their control. Use the reasoning of someone's worth and success and talent equating to how they're mourned on the next archetype. You'll find people have separate words to say. The lowlife, the bad egg, the black sheep, the misfit, the scum, troublemaker, problem child. All these names have one thing in common. They are what society deems the lowlife. These are the people that your mom tells you to avoid when you grow up as a kid because they're bad influences. That if you end up like them, you'll end up in jail or worse. And then when you grow up, those stories don't stop. In some ways, they get stronger. Those are the people that your parents look at, when you're out on the town walking, point at that person on the ground, houseless, on drugs. Don't end up like that guy. Don't be a lowlife. They can't seem to turn out right, no matter what they do. They only bring misery and despair to those around them. This is the story of Isaac. I remember standing next to my 5th grade classmate, who we'll call Isaac. We were standing on the balcony on the 2nd story of our classroom hallway, I guess you can call it. We were kicked out for, I don't know. Look, when I was a kid, I was a talkative child, and so I'd get in trouble for that a lot. It's not like I was violent or anything, but I think one day, me and Isaac were talking a little bit too much, and so we ended up outside, kicked out. Now, here's the issue. My dad was not a man who I wanted to make upset. he was particularly terrifying when I got in trouble. I always thought that whatever the school could do to me, my dad would do 10 times, 100 times worse. So I wasn't particularly worried about getting chewed out by my 5th grade teacher, but my father, well, that's a different story. But for Isaac, well, this was just another Tuesday. Since kindergarten, and for those of you internationally, I don't know what you guys call that, but like when you're really young, Isaac was always the troublemaker. Isaac was the person the moms told you not to hang around. But anyway, I was having a slight panic attack at the wee age of 10, and I was trying to cool myself, and I turned to Isaac, and I saw that he was as chill as a cucumber. And it kind of pissed me off, because I think probably at the time I blamed him. Because, of course, you're going to blame the troublemaker. It's always their fault. So I asked him, in a 10-year-old way, "What's wrong with you? Why do you always do this?" I still remember the look on his face. It's burned into my memory. I can see it now. In almost a surprised way, but in a very neutral tone. Isaac said, "I don't know." I'll never forget his face and the way the words sort of just escaped his mouth. He had the face of a broken man at 10 years old. What cards was Isaac dealt? Let's talk about it. Isaac's mother left his father when he was 6 years old. But Isaac's mother thought, well, that's bad. But try this on for size. Isaac's mom would make plans with Isaac every couple months or so and say, "I'm coming to visit. I'm going to pick you up. We're going to go to Disneyland. We're going to go and travel. I'm going to spend time with you." And every single time, Isaac's mother would cancel. Right at the last minute. "Oh, sorry. Something came up." What do you think that tells Isaac at 8 years old? I mean, it tells him that he's not loved for. His mother doesn't care enough. His father, well, raising a kid alone and where we were, which was not a cheap place, it's not easy. So he worked double, triple shifts in hard construction to pay for the bills. So he couldn't watch Isaac after school. And there was no after-school program for Isaac because his family couldn't afford it. So what did Isaac do in his free time? Well, he started taking beers from his family fridge. Not at 13, at 9. He would go to the local grocery store, convenience places, gas stores, steal snacks with his friends. He'd bike around the town, causing issues with police, tagging places with spray paint. He started doing drugs at 11. Weed, that is. But hard drugs followed not that long after. Isaac, funny enough, had the A1 allele variant of the DRD2 gene, one of the ones I talked about before. This is known to be causally related to the addictive personality trait. See, alcohol for Isaac wasn't like it was for a lot of you. Maybe you sneak a beer at 16, go out with your friends, drink a little bit too much, throw up, go home, have some jungle juice. See, for Isaac, it wasn't a rite of passage, but a controlling force. His grades dropped, and he never recovered. See, Isaac wasn't taught discipline or delayed gratification, so he never was able to hold a consistent job. Instead of being supported by the community around him when he made mistakes like the genius would, he was branded as a lowlife. Who not to be? the story he heard not just from his own parent, not just from the parents around him, but from his peers too. When the genius died, they say it was a bright light extinguished far too soon. When Isaac dies, will his name ring ceremoniously just like theirs? Finally, let's talk about you. Let's talk about the average Joe or Jane. We ain't sexist here. You probably did well in class, but not great. Maybe you got good grades, maybe even some A's. But you never really cared to go further. It just didn't seem all that interesting to you. Maybe you went to college, state, community, got a degree in something that was cool, but I don't know, it just never seemed like it was your passion. Maybe you got an office job where you enter into spreadsheets for 8 hours a day. Maybe you work a service job, work at the local Whole Foods or 7-Eleven. Maybe you don't work at all. You live with your parents. You're not fulfilled in life. You never had any serious relationships. You have some friends, but you don't really connect with them. You feel like you can do more in life, like you were made for more, but life is just, it's so easy to slip. It's so easy to just drift. Maybe your parents were around, maybe they were divorced, but middle income, and maybe times were tough, occasionally, but you made by. And maybe you have decent genetics. People see you as the average looking face guy. You're 5'8", you're 5 out of 10, hair is okay, not a particularly impressive body. This story is not the lowlife, and it's not the genius, and it's what most people are. And yet we're told the same lie like everyone else. That if you just work hard enough, you could be the genius. And if you make the wrong mistakes, you could be the lowlife. But the truth is, you'll always just be the average Joe or the average Jane, because your genetics were enough that you didn't fall into despair, but not enough to push you over the edge to make you that special. And your upbringing was good, but look, you didn't have those connections that daddy got you, an internship at Goldman Stanley, and you didn't quite have the hookup to be able to make income over the summers, so you kind of just drifted. Is that normal? Is that okay? Is that justice? What were you do? Those pangs of desire are filled by narratives we craft for ourselves that are based on mythology. There is no bootstraps. There's only the state of the universe and who you are. But we lie to ourselves, and we move forward in life. Maybe it's a necessary lie, but here's the thing. The genius, the low life, and the average have the same thing in common. They had no control over who they became. Geniuses didn't choose their parents. The low life didn't, decide to be born into poverty. And the average person didn't choose the nature and nurture that got them there either. Ultimately, we're all just products of things we could never control. Now, you may be thinking, but this is all hogwash. All doohickey, all lies. Just a sad old man. But let's get a little bit deeper into the evidence of what I'm saying. If you're still unconvinced, twin studies have found that IQ plays a huge role in your development. It's not a perfect metric, but IQ is largely genetic. The only thing that affects IQ is poor environmental factors. Personality traits like conscientiousness, being curious, having emotional stability, these are all influenced by your genetics. No control. Whether or not you had a neurodevelopmental disorder like ADHD or a learning difference, dysgraphia, dyslexia. These have serious effects on your life outcome, but no control. More than just learning, though. I think this is a critical point. Your attractiveness matters a whole lot. I mean, this topic warrants its own discussion, but romantic and sexual validation matters. We're human beings. Reproduction is in our nature, for the vast majority of us. As you mature into adulthood, being validated sexually is massive in your development. A large part of the human experience is having deep and fulfilling relationships with others, including sex. The genius, as depicted on screen, beautiful art, if I may add, they have the symmetric face, strong features, full hair, and a healthy body, which is almost all genetic. Oh, and class, of course. Segue to class consciousness for a little bit. Wealth plays a huge factor in everything I just listed. Ever notice that celebrities, wealthy people, they just look better? I mean, if you go to some of the wealthiest cities in America, it's crazy. You'll see some of the most beautiful people you've ever seen. Is it because all the beautiful people just flock to these places? Well, instead of thinking about beauty, think about money. Wealth has an outsized statistical effect on beauty. Having access to safe and healthy diet, skincare products, sunscreen, expensive specialists, visiting a dermatologist regularly, going to Equinox. You know they charge, it's some absurd fucking... It can't be worth it, by the way. You better go to Equinox and they just, I don't know. They put you in a bed and give you drugs and they turn you into Giga Chad. It can't be worth it. But rich people can afford it. Also, they have the time to spend in the gym. I'm not saying that, if you're not rich, you can't go to the gym. But you ever wonder why fitness influencers look the way they do? It's because it's literally their job. And if you're wealthy, you can afford the time to prioritize your health. You might, another factor, you might live in a pollution-free zone. Pollution has a huge effect on your attractiveness. By the way, guys, a huge factor in the growth of your right, is malnutrition, and were you exposed to lead and shit? If you grew up in a safe area, to add that to the list. Giga Chad got internships. He didn't work manual labor. He didn't do roofing for the summer because his parents gave him access to that. Also, what the fuck is a wellness retreat? Have you ever heard of that shit? I've thought about it. What is a wellness retreat? I just imagine you get these cucumbers and they're taped to your eyes and you walk around in the sauna naked in Switzerland or something. And then they throw mud on you. I don't know. But that... I don't see a lot of poor people going on wellness retreats. Wealth is the face card hack that influencers and look maxers alike don't want you to know. They don't talk about the fact that genetics is 90% of how you look. Having access to private tutors, the best musically trained teachers money can buy, nutrition and diet from a young age. Shit, I eat mac and cheese and Oreos. Chad over here has been eating strained asparagus, chicken and duck confit, and russet potatoes since 2. How does the genius always seem to rise to the top of every arena they join? It's because they have every advantage the lowlife couldn't even dream of. And neither could the average Joe or Jane. Geniuses didn't choose their reality. Lowlives and regular people didn't choose their reality either. The difference between the genius and the lowlife is the difference between a lion and a zebra. Neither knows why they were born the way they were or taught how to behave, but the zebra runs and the lion hunts. So all that sucks. All of humanity has been defined by genetic and circumstantial determinism. Right, we've never been able to get away from that, and until CRISPR starts manufacturing Captain Americas, I don't see that changing. And until we eliminate income inequality, every other factor I talked about in development will keep happening. I mean, some questions I personally think about, is how can you ever feel satisfied with your life if you're the genius, the lowlife, or the average Joe, knowing that you didn't really do anything to get there? You never had a choice over the trajectory of your life. Where is justice and hope if your outcomes aren't really influenced by you? And arguably the most important question is, what are we supposed to do about this? This is not doomer incel hangout place, right? That's not the community I'm looking to build here. But I am looking to share the truth so that we can have a shared understanding of reality. It's the only way we'll be able to change things. I find myself at this point, and I'm sure you may have an idea due to the wonderful art on screen. There's a quote from a movie I like called Margin Call. Great actor list. And there have always been, and there always will be, the same percentage of winners and losers, happy fuckers and sad suckers, fat cats and starving dogs in this world. Yeah, there may be more of us today than there's ever been, but the percentages, they stay exactly the same. The truth is, billions of people experience unjust and deeply insufferable lives. If you've ever watched The Platform, you would know you can't shit upwards. Only the person standing firmly on the cliff can reach down and pull the person who's on the ledge up. This has not happened, right? And you might say that there are good people out there, and I agree, and there are people standing on that cliff pulling others up, but the same problems have existed and persisted for millennia, and they will continue to exist. The purpose of this outlet is to connect people through a shared understanding. Why would we reach out if we believe that the person falling off the cliff can pull themselves up? Thank you, everyone, for getting to the end. This was episode 1. Among other topics I'm going to be covering, we're going to be going over free will, the great lie of university, not for the Andrew Tate reasons, the indifference pill, the lie of grit, weakness. We're going to be covering a lot of topics because there's so much in this world that people just don't see for what it is. If that sounds interesting to you, stick around. Subscribe. Check out my Substack, my Medium, where I posted the full version of this talk in a bit of a nicer format. Although you, the viewer, get the best art here, hand-drawn by me. Clearly you can see my genetics and upbringing gave me those artistic skills. But thank you for watching, and until next time.